Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Lace up those boots and sling on the pack for a romp through trails, short and long. With your host and Renaissance man, Doc. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the Trail, Dirtbags, and Hiker Trash. I'm Doc, and this is the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Let's start off with a reminder. If you are enjoying the podcast, take just a minute, help us out, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're not enjoying the pod, well, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest, a long-distance hiker with quite a story behind him and in front of him. Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod, Jared Aslett. How's it going, Jared?
Doing awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Did I get the last name right? Is it Aslett?
Yep, nailed it.
Okay, perfect. Hey, I know that you've been on the trail. You put over 1,000 miles last year on the trail, and we have a unique, maybe it's not unique. On this podcast, we go by trail names, if at all possible. During your time on the trail, have you had a chance to pick up a trail name?
Yeah, I sure did. And just to clarify, it was only 600 on the PCT, but overall there was about 1,000. So
okay, all right.
Yeah, my trail name is Yeti.
Okay, and we love to hear the story behind the trail name. How did you end up with Yeti?
Yeah, I think why they gave it to me and why I think I got it are a little different, but I did the hike solo, and as the miles started going on, there was groups forming around me, tramlines and whatnot, and they said they'd see me like pop in and then I'd just disappear. And then the conversation started going, have you guys seen that big hairy guy lately? And somebody was like, oh, I spotted him yesterday, or I spotted him a week ago. And so they just started calling me Yeti, and I had no idea. And then a few days later, I came into camp and someone's like, hey, are you Yeti? And I was like, no. And then somebody else that was there was like, yeah, you're Yeti. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm Yeti.
That is great. Yeti or Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the world champion player in hide and seek. So that's very appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it was, at first, I didn't know if I was going to take it just because it kind of highlights, I can be a little socially awkward when it comes to like making new friends or meeting new people. And so I just kind of walk up like, hey, how's it going? Good. And then, all right, well, see you later. Kind of just walk off, So it was fitting, though. It worked.
Okay. Well, hey, Happy New Year. As we're recording this, we're early in January, not too far down the road of 2023. Any good gifts, any good hiking gifts over the holiday season?
Not hiking specific. I did get some socks, which is always appreciated. Some darn toughs. My favorite gift, though, my girlfriend got me a custom shirt from this company online. You give them a few props and they make a custom design for you. And she told them I like hiking, my golden retriever, and Wild Turkey 101, the bourbon. And so I got sent a shirt that's like a dog hiking in the mountains carrying a bottle of booze with him. So it was pretty fantastic. I think I might take it with me.
That is quite the combo. That's awesome. We need to make sure that we get a picture of that so we can let our viewers take a look at that.
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Hey, Yeti, have you had a chance to listen to the podcast before?
I have, yeah.
Okay. And do you have a favorite episode or a favorite guest?
I really enjoyed the recent ones lately, just with some people I met on trail. I met Long Story and Ballsack. And then, I always enjoyed watching like Tip Tap, or I think that's what it was. Yeah, Tip Tap, just because we've all seen her YouTube videos. Yeah. And then I really like the Ginger Balls one. He's a fun guy to listen to.
He is hilarious. And we've got another episode with him coming up a little bit later this spring. So he did not disappoint. We recorded that maybe a week ago, and he was great. So we've got a fourth or fifth episode with him. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Right on.
All right. Hey, Yeti, I only ask because I want to make sure that you are aware of a segment we do towards the end of the episode called the Pro Tip Insight of the Week. That's where I will turn to you and ask you to share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make sure that their next outdoor experience is even better. So don't be surprised. You can feel free to drop trail wisdom throughout the episode, but you will definitely be on the hook for that one at the end.
Perfect. I'm ready for it.
Okay. And because this is the beginning of the year and you're a first-time guest on the podcast, we're going to give you the full experience, the full treatment here on the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Are you ready for this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's time for a current event.
So occasionally, very occasionally, we will do a current event. I'll find something in the headlines and pull it out of the headlines, take some notes on it, and we'll talk about it here. We'll get your fresh perspective. And I saw something last week that came out. We tried to get an episode recorded last week. We didn't end up working out, but I had this story ready to go for you, and I think it's still appropriate. So, Mac from Halfway Anywhere. Are you familiar with the website Halfway Anywhere?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so he just came out with his PCT gear guide, along with his class of 2022 survey from the PCT hikers. So there were 953 completed surveys, and I wanted to go through with you the most common gear highlights based on that survey. All right, we'll see how many of these items you actually have or what your choice is. I always like to talk gear here on the podcast.
Yeah, I love it. I bet I have a bunch because I used that survey when I was picking out my gear.
Okay. All right, so let's go through some of the most common gear on the trail, on the PCT this last year. The most common backpack, the ULA Circuit, weighing in at 2.2 pounds.
Yeah, I saw that everywhere. I didn't end up using that one, but I definitely saw it out there quite a bit.
Okay, what did you have for a pack?
I have the Z-Packs Arcall Ultra.
Yep, Z-Pack's another very popular one. All right. Most common shelter out there, a Z-Packs Duplex, 1.19 pounds.
Got that one, and I upgraded it to the Taj Mahal and bought the poles with it.
Nice. Your trail name could have been Taj.
Yeah.
All right. The most common sleeping bag, the Enlightened Equipment Enigma, 21.2 ounces.
Yeah, I didn't use that one. All my big 3 Z-Packs, and there's a story behind that, but I have the Z-Packs. I had a 10D bag.
Okay. What is the story behind the big 3 all being from Z-Packs?
They're a great group of people, and they kind of saw my social media, and we can get into that if you want. But I was speaking with somebody about the big 3 and trying to narrow it down, and a lot of it came down to Z-Packs, and they reached out and just said, "Hey, we love supporting, inspiring people. Tell us what you want." And I just listed the big 3, and a week later it was here.
That is awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, they are a fantastic company. Have you watched Highline, the documentary?
I don't think I have.
Okay. Well, it's a story about 5 guys doing the Uinta Highline Trail, and just a great documentary. But one of the guys, they talk about him owning a backpacking gear company. They never say that what company it is, but I did some research afterwards, and it's the owner of Z-Packs. So really, really great group of guys, him in particular. So I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, for sure. I have too many good things to say about him. So.
Okay. All right. Most common sleeping pad out there, the Thermarest Neo Air X Lite at 12 and a half ounces.
I carried it for a week and put it in a hiker box.
Okay. What was the deal there?
I've learned that I don't like sleeping pads. Towards the end of that week, I was sleeping on the ground next to it. And so I picked up an accordion. I think it was the Z Lite, and I just slept so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the Neo Air Lite, is that the one that sounds like a potato chip bag?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm like so self-conscious about like waking up other people. So when there's people next to me, I don't sleep good because I'm focusing on not moving.
Yeah, we've talked about that one on the show a couple of times. And I've been assured that the longer you use it, the more worn in it gets and the less noise it makes. But man, that has not been, maybe I haven't been on a long enough hike, but the guy that I was hiking with a couple of times had that particular brand, and it was I would wait to see where he set up his tent, and then I'd go to the opposite side of the campsite.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. That, and I sleep like a wild animal, all spread out. So even I had the wide pad, and I was still, all over the sides of it. So
you slept like a Yeti.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Most common shoes out there, the Ultra Lone Peaks. Not surprised at that one.
Yep, I rocked those and went through 2 pairs.
Okay. All right. And then most common water treatment is the Sawyer Squeeze. 3 ounces of weight right there. And Sawyer is a brand new sponsor to the John Freaking Muir Pod. So big shout out to them.
Yeah, love the Sawyer Squeeze. I use that one too.
Okay. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about gear here, and we're going to keep going a little bit.
The Must Bring Gear Review.
With the Must Bring Gear Review, sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company Six Moon Designs. Ever tried out any Six Moon Designs products?
I haven't.
Okay. All right. So what this feature is that if you were to let a stranger pack your bag with pretty much generic gear for a multi-day or multi-week or multi-month hike, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? And if you've got a particular brand for that specific piece of gear, even better. So Yeti, what is your must-bring piece of gear out there on the trail? What do you have to have?
Yeah, mine's going to be a little off here. I definitely mentioned Z packs, but my must piece of gear would be my Crocs.
No way.
Yeah, there's something about getting to camp and taking those shoes off and having a nice, comfy pair of camp shoes that was just invaluable to me.
Okay, so they're a camp shoe. They're not your hiking shoe. You got your Ultra Lone Peaks for your hiking shoe, but definitely a camp shoe. Jeff Garmeyer has run. I don't know if he's run a marathon or a half marathon in Crocs, but he did that. He was trying to convince people it was an athletic shoe.
Yeah, I hiked a little bit with a guy that was hiking in them too out there, and I just couldn't do that. But they're great for like river crossings too, because I hate it when my feet get wet. So I just throw those on real quick and can get across anything.
Nice. All right.
It's the hiking pole.
Okay, now we're on to the hiking pole, and that is pole POLL, like a survey, not POLE, like the kind of thing you carry in your hands out there. I always like to point that out to my guests because I think that's very clever that I came up with that. I never get any reaction, similar to yours, very, very little reaction, but, it makes me feel good to explain it that way.
Love it.
Okay. Now, this is a 7-question survey that helps me determine your level of sanity. I'm going to give you a score at the end of this between 1 and 100, with 1 being completely insane and 100 being completely sane. If I were to talk to your friends and family, your girlfriend, and say, hey, where would you put Yeti on the sanity scale? What kind of score do you think you'd get?
That's a tough one. I would say probably somewhere right in the middle because I have my stuff together as far as like the education and stuff like that, but I tend to like jump without thinking. So I'd say I'd land right around 50 probably.
50. Okay. Now, anybody who has set out to complete one of the American long trails, there's an automatic 25-point deduction because that really speaks to your state of mind, right? So the highest score you can get is 75. You okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. It feels appropriate, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to start off easy. First question out of 7. Trekking poles or no trekking poles out there?
Trekking poles for sure. Yeah, and I listened to an episode. I can't remember who your guest was, but he said no trekking poles and they don't help you at all. And the whole time I was like gasping, because he has way more experience than me. But as for me, using those poles was so valuable on my knees going on descents. It just helps so much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he lost major points in the poll on that question. So
yeah.
All right. Question number 2. I already know the answer. I'm going to ask it anyway. Boots or trail runners?
Trail runners for sure.
Okay. And the Ultra Lone Peaks, you went through 2 pairs on the PCT?
Yeah. The first pair already had about 300 miles on it. So each of them lasted about 500. And I could have went farther. I just, wanted to keep the feet comfy, so I'd upgrade.
Right. Now, were you like the typical hiker who, when they first get involved, their entire life, they have this image of what hiking is all about, and they feel like, okay, I have to get, if I'm going to go hiking, I'm going to get boots. Did you start out in boots and then move to trail runners, or were you strictly trail runners the whole time?
Like growing up and stuff like that, I was always in hiking boots, just being in Idaho and in the big mountains and it snow a lot. But once I started researching the PCT heavy, and everyone just said trail runners. So like 6 months before I was setting off on the PCT, I bought a pair to try them out and ended up loving them. So I didn't use any boots on the PCT.
Okay. Now, when it comes to your shelter system, I think I know the answer, but let's go ahead and ask it. What is your preference? Is it tent, tarp, hammock, bivy, or hey, let's just go cowboy camping?
I did mostly camp in a tent, but once I started cowboy camping and started, experiencing that, it became addictive for sure. So, I would say 50-50, but there's something about getting in a tent and having your own space and being able to just relax. It's pretty awesome.
Now, are you one of those guys that can cowboy camp anywhere, or the conditions have to be right for cowboy camping?
I started doing it to get out of the wind just because wind was my enemy, being able to sleep with it and stuff. And then, if you're in places where there's bears, I was very skeptical of that. In the desert, everyone was worried about snakes and stuff, but I was more worried about spiders. I just have a huge phobia of spiders for some reason. But yeah, I could do it pretty much anywhere, just nothing crazy.
Okay. Where do you think the phobia of spiders came from? Did you have a bad experience as a child somewhere?
I think it's because we used to live like in a cabin, and there's hobo spiders. And if you're not familiar with those, they're like really aggressive and they chase you. So if you see a hobo spider, it'll start running towards you. And yeah, ever since that as a kid, I'm like, no, thanks.
All right. That is terrifying. I would have a phobia as well. In fact, I might already have a phobia, but it would be compounded if I had spiders chasing me.
Yeah, absolutely. I make my girlfriend kill him.
Attaboy. All right. Question 4, sleeping bag or quilt?
I used a sleeping bag, but I never zipped it up, so I used it like a quilt. So I had a bag, but little of both, I guess.
I'm unsure how to score that answer. That's the first time this answer has been offered on the podcast, so congratulations on that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I like my feet to be extra toasty, but I like the room of having a quilt. So
Okay. And when it comes to food out on the trail, are you a stove guy? Do you like the cold soak, or do you go stoveless?
I never cold stoked once. I'm a big food guy, as you'll learn as this goes on. So, a nice warm meal at the end, some macaroni and cheese. Yeah, it's a stove for sure.
Okay. What's your go-to hot meal out on the trail?
My favorite one I tried, which is super hard to find, was the backpacker pantry. It was like a green chili mac and cheese.
Ooh,
Yeah, I only found it at like 2 stores, but it was fantastic.
that's next level right there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Question number 6, is life better above or below the tree line?
It's better enjoying it awake above the tree line, but it's better sleeping below it.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. And last question number 7, what's more important, pack weight or luxury items?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say pack weight probably for me, just because I was so focused on getting it dialed in. But there's a few, luxury items that I just refuse to go without too. So, yeah, but pack weight, I focused pretty heavy on that, and I got it pretty low.
Okay. So a couple of follow-up questions there. What was your pack weight on the PCT?
Base weight when I started was right about 13 pounds.
Nice. And
Yeah.
what were the must-bring luxury items other than your Crocs?
Yeah, the Crocs were the big one. I carried 2 pillows just to get for sleeping. And then I had an extra pair of camp socks and an extra pair of sleeping clothes, which, isn't, I guess, ultra light, quote unquote. So I call them my luxury items.
Okay. And tell me those were inflatable pillows and not full-size pillows from your bed at home.
No, definitely not. They're both inflatable.
Okay. All right. We went hiking with a guy in the Sierras. His first time on a multi-day backpacking trip, and he brought his full-size pillow from home along with towels to dry off when he gets out of the lake and all kinds of other stuff that he eventually ended up leaving behind at some point because it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, but a full-size pillow sounds amazing after a long day of hiking.
Doesn't it? You got that right. All right. Hey, I've got to do a little math here. Yeti, I've got to put your answers through the John freaking Muir Pod algorithm. So I got to carry the 3, going to multiply by root 3, and then divide by pi. We're going to adjust for the temperature on at dawn on the top of Whitney, and I come up with a score of 58. 58. That's pretty good.
Yeah, 58. I love that. It's higher than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, you're north of the midpoint line. You're a little more sane than insane. But that score is subject to change throughout the interview here.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds about right, because I met some pretty insane people out there.
Okay. All right. Hey, before we get too far down the trail, Why don't you take us through, your background, where you grew up, what kinds of activities you were involved in as a kid, and how in the heck did you end up on the trail? How did you get involved and interested in through hiking?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Southern Idaho, so outdoors was always like a big part of my life. The hunting, fishing, camping, pretty much outdoors as much as possible. And yeah, I grew up an athlete, did all the sports until my senior year. I blew out my knee playing football, and tried to keep doing it in college, and then realized it wasn't going to work out. So sports ended for me when I went into college. Um, and a lot of life events we can get into in the 20s, but I ended up just obsessing over the PCT because I had heard about something, and somebody's like, hey, watch this movie, the one everyone's seen. And then I just, someday I'm going to do that. And just started researching it more and more. But, as my life progressed and, certain things happened, and I gained a whole bunch of weight, which we can get into, and it just wasn't a possibility. It's something I never thought I'd do. So it was always in the back of my mind as something I would love. I watched all the YouTube videos, and I, kept up with it, and just never really thought it was going to happen. So pretty stoked when I made it happen.
Yeah, in a lot of my conversations with folks who have been on the PCT or the AT or the CDT or other even longer trails, it all started with some kind of seed that was planted, some kind of, I don't even want to call it a seed. It's more like a worm that gets into the brain and just kind of wriggles around for a while. What do you think the appropriate incubation time for that mind worm is from, inception to, actually foot on the trail? I've heard people who have lived with it for 10 plus years and finally hit the trail, or people as short as 6 months. What do you think the average is?
That's a great question. I think it's in your brain as long as it needs to be until you can't take it anymore, and you just got to take the step out there. And it's, for me, the reason I was so intrigued with it at first, not only the outdoors part, but the part of, life gets stressful. I have a stressful job. I was in school for a really long time. So the concept of all I have to do today is put one foot in front of the other, and for 5 months, that is the only thing you have to do, was so intriguing to me. So just shut everything out and just, be present. So that's what really drew me to it, I think.
Yeah, there certainly is a simplicity of purpose in life when you're out on the trail. I mean, you're waking up, you're breaking camp, you are walking down a trail, and then you're making camp and going to sleep and repeating, several weeks, months until it's over. But all the other stuff, all the extraneous stuff of city life just kind of falls by the wayside. Really appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. Gives you a lot of time to think about what's important.
Yes. And what did you think about out there?
A lot of, what I want to do with my life and what I want to be. And I've had a kind of a rough past, and just kind of processing through all that and being able to sit with it and think through it and just kind of feel all the feels. And, I spent so much of my life just, being tough and manning up and not dealing with anything, that it kind of led me down this road that was really bad, for me, until I eventually figured it out. But yeah, it's just, trying to figure out who I was, I guess.
Okay. Now, before we get to that story, the backstory there, what do you do currently to pay the bills and finance your adventures?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a unique situation. I hate this word, but social media influencer, I guess, or content creator, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Nice. I mean, you have a fairly large following on Instagram. I noticed.
Yeah, between Instagram and TikTok, it's over 1 million now.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and it all happened by accident, really. So it's been a bizarre year and a half.
So I keep telling Mrs. Doc, that's my goal as well, to be a social media influencer and retire from my day job. But I keep telling her, just be patient. It's going to happen. So I'll have to pick your brain.
Yeah, just got to keep grinding out the content.
Keep grinding. There you go. Now, let's see. Let's go to your story. You talk about a tough past, having to overcome some obstacles, being in a position where you thought that you wanted to hike, but you thought maybe you would never get there. Take us through that. What was going on?
Yeah, for sure. So it was, I had a lot of trauma in my younger years, and when I got to college, a lot of it also happened in my senior year of high school. So when I got to college, I found, my unhealthy coping mechanisms of, drinking, um, and doing all the things you're not supposed to be doing to be healthy. Joined a fraternity, and what better place to hide those bad habits than in a party house. And I still did great in school. I have 5 degrees now, but it was just trying to not think about all the things that were going on in my life, and I, drowned it with booze, and it ended up, um, through the years, I ended up gaining a lot of weight to where, July of 2020, I was almost 500 pounds. Um, and it was just from, I stopped doing all the things that I loved. I stopped after college. I played a little bit of semi-pro football, and I broke my ankle, so I couldn't play football anymore even after college. And that's when it just started going downhill. Started gaining a lot of weight, and at the time I was a news reporter, so I was on camera, and I quit that job because I hated seeing myself on camera, and switched careers and went into education. But yeah, a lot of unfortunate events. I used to be a big snowboarder guy. I used to work on a ski hill. And I went snowboarding one time when I was big, just delusional, and I got off the ski lift and went to put my boots on, and I couldn't reach my boots. And so it kind of hit me like, okay, we got to figure something out here. I stopped skating, surfing, all the things I loved. I stopped hunting, I stopped hiking, stopped traveling. And it just got to this point, towards the end of when I was 29 and 30, I was in kind of a toxic relationship, and we were engaged, and it kind of ended all of a sudden. And that was in June of 2020. And I was in this, dark place, I guess rock bottom, if you would call it. And I decided, enough's enough. I'm going to give myself 1 week, and then I'm going to figure my life out. And that was July 1st of 2020. And in the year and a half after that, I lost 235 pounds.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And I had a book here where I wrote down all my goals and what I wanted to do. And, I didn't even know if it was possible to lose all that weight. I had no idea what I was doing or how I was going to do it. But the first thing I wrote down was in giant letters was PCT, and I circled it and underlined it. And even at the time, I didn't believe I'd ever make it happen. But yeah, a year and a half later, I got my permit.
Nice. Now I have some follow-up questions. So you have 5 degrees now?
Yeah.
What are those degrees in?
My undergrads are in public relations, political science, and advertising. And then my grad degrees are in adult organizational learning and leadership and human resource development.
Fantastic. And you used to be a news reporter, and you switched from that and went into education. What did you do in education?
Yeah, I worked in administration for a bit in early college, senior coordinator. So I was helping high school students go to college, and then I was an adjunct professor, and I taught history of rock and roll.
Oh man, what a dream job right there. Adjunct professor of rock and roll.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it.
And take us through a typical semester in the rock and roll course at that college. What kind of
what surprised me?
Cover?
I covered everything, starting from the beginning, late 40s and all the way through. Well, I usually end like mid 90s because that's where, my favorites end. And I spend a lot of time in the late 60s because that's my favorite. But, it's these young kids. I went in there the first day and I said, who knows who Led Zeppelin is? And nobody raised their hand. And I was like, who knows who Bob Dylan is? And one kid raised his hand, and I was like, oh boy, we got a ways to go here. So yeah, we go through all of it, and it's, I tie it to like the cultural significance of the time, what was happening in the 60s, like Neil Young's For Dead in Ohio, what was that song about, things like that. And then we just talk about the history of rock and roll and how, a lot of Elvis stuff was stolen, and, just all the cool, fun things like that.
Yeah, I was an English teacher for a number of years, and I love talking about, nothing is written in a vacuum. There's context, there's social context, where the author grew up, what time period that the author grew up in, and, what was happening. And that's all seeps into the work of literature. And the same thing goes for music, right? I mean, there's definitely a context for all this.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite lessons, I would go through American Pie. And if you listen to every single lyric in that, it's talking about something completely different that's significant in the times, or, things like that, or the day the music died and what that's about. And, a lot of the young people just don't have any clue what was the day the music died, stuff
Right.
like that. So it's a lot of fun.
What was your favorite unit to teach or favorite band to teach?
I love the late '60s just because if I had to pick number one album of all time, I'm going Led Zeppelin 4, so all that stuff. And it's always fun too because I bring in my record player and my records, and I'll hand a record to a student. I'm like, okay, go play Stairway to Heaven, and they just look at it like, where's the next button? Where's the play button? And they just have no clue. So it's always fun to watch them try and struggle and find a track.
Nice. The best TikTok music, or the best music to put to TikTok related to anything hiking, is of course "Ramble On" by Led Zeppelin.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. What if you had to narrow it down to three? What are your top three favorite bands?
Led Zeppelin's going to be there. I'm a big fan of like the early '90s grunge too. So a little bit out there, but I love Blind Melon. And then let's see, switch up a completely different genre. I really love a lot of hard rock too. So maybe let's go Slipknot because they're incredible live.
Slipknot. Wow, that is quite the variety right there.
Yeah, they're just what popped into my head. I want to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, I had the great privilege of going to the stadium tour this past October. I think maybe it was August in at SoFi in Los Angeles, and the stadium tour was, of course, it was Joan Jett, Poison, Def Leppard, and Motley Crue, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, sounds like quite the lineup. I saw Joan Jett before in a few of those, I'm big fan of all of those. But yeah, it sounds like quite the concert.
All right, now you lost 230 pounds, you said?
Yeah, 235. Yeah.
235. How did you lose the weight? How did you go about doing that?
Day one, my older brother's a personal trainer. So day one, I just called him. I said, I'm ready. And he's like, all right, meet me in the gym in 30 minutes. And after the gym, he took me to the grocery store. And I just decided to grind. I was going to do whatever I could to chase these goals of mine. So it was consistent calorie deficit and exercise. I kept it really simple. And the key for me was just 100% consistency. That first year, I never skipped a day. I never had a, quote unquote cheat meal. I was just in grind mode. And it, bittersweet. And I hate to say that, but it was also during COVID. So I was locked down. I built a garage in my, or a gym in my garage, and I just locked myself in there and got to work.
Right. Now you say exercise. What kinds of activities would you do? And then also with the calorie deficit, what was your calorie limit per day?
Yeah. So for the exercises, I started just walking my dog a lot. And it got to the point where if we weren't going, she was barking at me and biting at me to go. So it became an everyday thing, and it started just 1 mile and worked up from there. And then I lift weights 3 to 5 times a week. When I had the home gym, it was a lot easier. But when I decided to do this PCT hike, I sold everything I owned. I used to invest in real estate as well. I sold everything, got rid of everything just to do this. So yeah. And then calorie deficit, when I started out, my brother put me on like, this is the calories, this is the carbs, this is the protein. And I just figured out like a few meals that would hit all those. In the first 2 months, I just ate the same thing every day, which is no way to live, right? But it worked. And then once I did my own research into it, I was just like, all right, I'm just going to focus on protein and calories, and kept them low. And there was a point there where I got too low, and went to my doctor because I was lifting weights and I could tell I was lifting less and less, which isn't supposed to happen when you're working out all the time. And my brother's like, yeah, you're not eating enough. And it didn't really hit me until, they start explaining like when you're that low in calories, you're also going to be losing muscle, and your heart's a muscle. So you could be doing real damage. So, went to my doctor and got all my blood work and stuff checked. And he's like, everything was fine. But he's like, yeah, you got to up those calories. And so it was like another mind game for me of, this is working and it's working fast. Now I got to slow it down, which was hard for me, but you got to listen to your doctor. So
that's right. Yeah, that could be frustrating, but you got to stay healthy.
Yeah, for sure.
So how many calories did you end up, was your average daily intake?
It changed, when I'm 480 pounds, that's a lot. When I got down to 250, it's a lot less. But I never being in the healthy way I was doing it, when I wasn't going too low, I stuck around right around 2000, 1800, which is still pretty low for a big guy, but um, yeah.
Yeah, consistency is key, right? I mean, putting yourself on lockdown and then this regimented program and following it faithfully, that is going to yield the most results in on the soonest timeline. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned since then, that first year, for most people, that's not realistic to, eat the same things, be 100% consistent. And I learned, in the few months after that, before I hit the trail, of the balance of it, of still being able to stay in a calorie deficit. But I'd started dating, and, you don't want to go on a date and order some broccoli, so I learned the balance of, living life and enjoying yourself, but also keeping it healthy and still losing weight. So I recommend the balanced approach, but for me at that size, what I needed is the all or nothing, and I'm not giving up no matter what.
that's right. Now, when you hit a certain age, like I did, your metabolism slows down. And so what I found kind of works for me right now is intermittent fasting. So I have a food window, I call it the food window, where I only eat between noon and 6. And it again, that consistency, that is very helpful for me. That if somebody offers me something after 6 or before noon, I say it's easier for me to say, no, the window's not open yet. I have to wait till noon, or I have to, it's already 6. I maybe tomorrow I can do it, but not right now. So that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard some great things about intermittent fasting and the different health benefits and stuff like that. For a while, was skipping breakfast just because I'm not a big breakfast guy. So technically I was doing that, but I never
Right.
like purposefully said I'm only doing this time.
Yeah. Now, what was your weight in high school?
High school, I was a little bigger than most people, but not, I would say a little above average. I was maybe 220, 230. But like I said, I was an athlete, and, I
Mhm.
was a state champion football player, and I did the baseball, did everything. I quit wrestling in high school just because I wasn't as good as that as I was at the other stuff. But um, it was never an issue for me
Yeah.
in high school. So
Yeah. You a lineman?
I was, yeah,
Offense, defense, both.
both.
Both. Two-way player.
Yeah. No, so we were, and I'm still proud of this. We were the first and only 5A state champions from Twin Falls High School in Idaho. Because after I graduated, they went to 4A because they built another high school. So we're the first and only state champs that were 5A.
Nice. Get yourself a ring.
I did, yeah. I lost it in college, of course, but
Oh.
I have plans of getting another one remade.
All right. So you're about 220 in high school. What did you set your goal weight for on the weight loss program to when you would decide, okay, now I can do the PCT?
It wasn't even, I just said an arbitrary number I threw out was 250. And it wasn't even like 250 in order to do the PCT, because even when I wrote down PCT, I didn't really believe in myself that it was a possibility. It was just this sky in the high, or yeah, pie in the sky dreams, whatever the saying is.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got down to about 260, um, it was about 2 months before the permits came out, and I'm like, this is a possibility now. I'm hiking or walking 10 miles a day right now, no matter, already this could actually be a thing. So I started looking into it more and more. And then once I got that permit, it was like, okay, this is real. This is going to happen. Let's make it work. I put in my notice at work. I started training hard. And it just kind of became a reality when I got down to about 240. And then in January, I'm hiking in March. I'm going to lose way more weight than I want to. So I stopping the diet right now. And I probably gained 10, 15 pounds before I started hiking, which is not a good thing, but I just figured I'd lose it all on the trail. So.
Okay. And that brings us to the PCT. We're going to put a pin in it right there because we're going to take a break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll pick this up right on the other side. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're talking to Jared Aslett, a.k.a. Yeti, about his journey to finding himself on the PCT. So he found himself in a very dark spot, pulled himself out of it, stuck to the routine, did what he had to do, lost the weight, picked up some healthy habits, and now he has his PCT permit. So you got that in January?
I got it in November, and I was like the 8th pick. I got so lucky.
Wow. Top 10 pick.
Yep.
So this is November of 2021?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and you did the hike in 2022.
Yep.
Okay, so between being the 8th pick and actually stepping foot on the trail, what other types of activities did you do to prepare yourself physically, or also do any kind of research to make sure that you were in a good spot?
Yeah. So I took a little bit of a unique approach. Not so much in the physical preparation because I had already been exercising for a year and a half. I was confident in my, stamina and putting in some miles. And so I had read and saw in some like YouTube videos or whatever it was, one of the hard aspects of the PCT is, being alone or, dealing with that seclusion and stuff like that. So I packed up, I built like a camper in the back of my truck, and I packed up and I took off for about 4 months and just traveled solo, bounced around to different parks and did some hiking. I made the mistake of starting off that adventure in Hawaii. And I say the mistake because I almost didn't leave. I was there for like 3.5 weeks, and I was like, I wanted to drive across the whole country, and I just got stuck there. I was living in a like shipping container home on North Shore and just surfing every day and swimming in the ocean. And one day, I had my backpack with all the stuff I was living with, and we were driving by the airport, and I just said, "Let me out." And they're like, "What?" And I said, "Let me out. If I don't leave right now, I'm never leaving." And so I just hopped back on a plane, came back, and then I started. The plan was to go all across the country, but I did like 11 states, mostly in the West. And then I was in some sketchy mountains in Northern California, and my truck broke down. So I drove it. I was able to fix it with some duct tape and drove it back to Idaho. And it was out of commission for a while. So I hopped on my motorcycle and just started exploring some places in Idaho and hiking off of my motorcycle. I just park it at a trailhead or a campground and just take off. So just really learning to make sure I was going to be okay being alone, spending the time with myself, because, that's something I hadn't done in a long time. And so that was a big preparation. And going into the PCT,
Well,
people always
hang on, Yeti. Oh, yeah. Hang on, Yeti. You glossed over a lot of information right there. I got some questions for you.
Yeah.
Number one, a sketchy town in Northern California. Do you care to drop names there, or?
So I didn't mean town, like a mountain range. I was just going off of, I had just barely made my social media public by then. And so people knew I was traveling, and I asked somebody like, what's a cool camp spot? This is the area I'm in. And somebody gave me a camp spot, and I didn't research it. I just put it in my phone, and I start driving up this mountain, and there's an ocean on the side with a huge drop off and a dirt road, and I'm bouncing around. And as I'm going up, my clutch gives out. There's nowhere to turn around. I had no clutch, so I'm just ramming it in gear. And I found a place that had just enough where I could get my truck up and back it enough, and made it back down that mountain. And I was, not to be graphic, when I got down to the bottom, I got out of my truck and vomited because I'm like, I almost just died. And then I'm like, from then on, I'm like, I need to start researching what I'm doing instead of just driving. And I'm like, oh, that looks cool, and going up there. So from then on, I started planning like a day ahead.
Nice. And did you fix the clutch with duct tape?
So the clutch was slipping to where I couldn't get it into certain gears, but I could, if you start it first, it'll jump start, and then I could shift it with the RPMs. And I did that for like 300 miles to make it back. And it was so sketchy, but I made it.
Wow. Now, you also said you started in Hawaii, and you also made reference to this vehicle that you're in. Did you take the vehicle over to Hawaii?
No, I just hopped on plane and yeah.
Okay. So
island hopped a little bit.
That's a diehard approach to make sure that you drove that vehicle in every state.
No, I knew somebody in Hawaii, and his family had like these like shipping container home setups, and I stayed in one of those for a while.
Yeah, and I love the willpower. Again, this comes back to willpower of, you're having such a great time and maybe never ever going to leave. And you take that moment when you're near the airport, hey, just let me out. I got to go. If I don't go now, I'm never going.
Yep, absolutely. And I was only in the airport, surprisingly, for like an hour, and they're like, yeah, we got a flight in an hour. And I was like, all right, sign me up.
All right. Sorry to interrupt there. Go ahead and continue with your story there.
Oh, I don't even remember where I was going with it, to be honest.
Well, you just finished up with the sketchy mountain and fixing your car with duct tape, and then in your preparation for the PCT. Oh, you know what? One more thing before you continue, I'm going to continue to interrupt. Have you seen the TV show Alone?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So I mean that you're exactly right that the reason that most of those people tap out is not because of hunger or elements or anything else. It's being alone, especially when they're out there for 30, 60, 70 days just by themselves. I mean, it really wears on the human psyche. So I think that's a good approach that you took to try and be out there by yourself for a long time in preparation for the PCT.
Yeah, absolutely. And it worked out because I spent a majority of my time on the trail alone.
Okay. So you head down to the border, starting off in Campo. What's going through your mind?
Getting to Campo was a nightmare for me as well. Because I called an Uber to take me to Cleef, but there's no like address when you type that into Uber. Or I typed in the address, but they like don't go there or something. And there was a language barrier between me and the driver. He just saw my backpack and he kept looking at his phone and looking at me. And he's like, "Border?" I was like, "Yeah, border." He's like, "The border," and I was like, "Yes, the border." So he'd like with my backpack, he's probably confused. Like, are you sneaking into Mexico? But they ended up dropping me off. It was like 10 o'clock at night in the middle of nowhere, not near Cleef. I mean, it was like 2 miles away, but he just pulls over and there's no buildings, no nothing. He's like, "All right, you're here." And so I get out of the car and I'm like pulling up my map and I didn't have great service. I had no idea where to go. So I just started walking down the road. And then when I finally got service, I looked up Cleef's number and called him. And the guy just goes, "Yeah, just walk towards the lights. Which direction are you walking?" And I was like, "South." He's like, "Yeah, walk towards the lights." I was like, "Okay." So 30 minutes later, I pulled into Cleef at camp and everyone was already going to bed. So I just set up really quick and got into my tent. But yeah, it was an adventure in itself getting there.
And what were your feelings the first few days out on trail? You know, I've talked to a lot of people who kind of had that imposter syndrome where, you know, they feel like everybody else is so much more experienced and that, you know, they're just kind of faking it till they make it. Is that kind of similar with you or?
Yeah. And I would say mine was to an extreme. It took me actually, I don't think I ever got over it. The whole time I was out there, I never felt like I was a real hiker. I never felt like I was one of them. I always kind of felt like a fraud. And I think that's why I spent most of the trail alone. Just because, I have experience in the outdoors and I've experienced backpacking, nothing through hikes or nothing extreme, but I had done multi-day hikes before, when we go to elk camp, we were in the mountains for a while. So I knew I was comfortable with my skills. I was just coming from this place of, trying to prove to myself that I was, worthy of being there, I guess. But those first few days, you start seeing the things that you watch in all the videos, right? The sign that says 3 miles this way and, 2,000 something this way. And it's just kind of like this euphoric feeling. And then you get to the canyon, and the name's escaping me right now, but that first canyon, like 16 miles in, and a lot of people really struggled the day that I was there. They didn't carry enough water. Hauser Canyon. And I start walking up it, and I carried quite a bit of water, enough because I knew that was going to be the end of my hike towards midday, which, a lot of people frowned on, but I was confident in my abilities to get up it. But I get going and, maybe a quarter mile up, I see an older gentleman folded over a rock, just drenched in sweat, really struggling, out of water. So I gave him half of my liter that I had left, and he was grateful, of course. And then I kept going. And then a guy behind me, a different guy, had to call search and rescue, heat exhaustion. And it kind of hit me like, this is real. And a lot of people call Hauser the Gauntlet because it's your first like real mountain or like canyon you're walking out of, and it's really hot. And I breezed through it. I was just cruising. I put on, this audiobook, and I just was passing everybody and just cruising right along. I had plenty of water. I was out by the time I got to the top because I gave another person some water, and I figured there was a reserve at the top. And if not, I only had 2 more miles. So I get to the top where the reserve is, and there's, volunteers coming from Lake Morena carrying jugs, and they offered me water. I was like, people behind me needed more. There's only 2 more miles. I'm fine. got into camp. So that kind of gave me a little confidence boost. But it was a real eye-opening experience that, hey, you're out here. And then I got a huge blister. So I spent a half a zero or a Nero on my third day on the PCT, just letting that blister heal.
Right. Now, when you were getting ready for the PCT, did you have a certain part that you were really excited about or you weren't looking forward to? I mean, what were your feelings about going into the desert? Because I know people have kind of preconceived notions about what that desert piece is going to be all about.
I absolutely did, because I mean, I was looking forward most to the Sierras and I ended up leaving right before that. But all these YouTube videos, everyone skips over the desert. It seems like their videos really start at like mile 5, 6, 700. So when I hear desert, I just thought, semi-flat desert, it's going to be hot, long water carries, no problem. But when you get out there, you're hiking up and down canyons and mountains the whole time. So it completely different than what I expected. I thought, rolling hills-ish desert, and it's not. You're up and down every single day.
Yeah, in his book, Journeys North, is that the name of the book? By Barney Scout Mann?
Yeah.
Journeys North. Yeah. Did you read that?
I'm halfway through it. I got it up right.
Okay.
I actually just was talking with him on Instagram.
Yeah, he talks a little bit about that desert experience, and he refers to the Sky Islands. And I thought that was a beautiful way to put it, because there are parts where you're down on flat desert land, but then there's also these ascents to the top of these what he calls Sky Islands, and then back down again.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what did you learn about yourself out there on the trail as you progressed further on this hike?
I learned that surprisingly enough, I didn't have as much time to reflect as I thought I would, because I'm just thinking about this sucks right now, or this is amazing, or, trying to be present. And then I just kind of, I took my body to two very different extremes. Most people don't hike, 600 miles continuous, and most people don't get to 500 pounds, which, thankfully that's not the case. And I just learned, like, I'm capable of doing things, hard things, even if I didn't at first believe I was.
And do you have a favorite memory from your time on the trail out there?
Yeah, I had a few unique experiences. My favorite memories, like you mentioned, type 2 fun. The first real scary incident I can remember is the San Jacintos, because there was still snow when we got there. And, a person in front of me slipped and they caught themselves, luckily, but 3 more feet and it would have been disastrous. And, like 2 weeks before we got there, somebody passed away, had an accident on that mountain. So it just builds in your mind of this kind of scary situation, but you're going to do it anyways. And then I got up there and there's some snow drops where you had to get down to the water, where I was terrified. But there's people down at the water watching you, so you're not going to like take a break, access. I'm like, no, I got this, and just powered through it. I had a couple unique experiences. For me, a lot of people in Acton get off and go into Six Flags. Well, I had been too big to ride roller coasters, so I used to love them as a kid. So I'm like, absolutely taking this opportunity. Went and rode some roller coasters. Another unique experience, NBC figured out about my story and wanted me to come do a segment with Access Hollywood. So when I got to Cajon Pass, they sent a car, came picked me up, took me to Universal Studios. And, I'm smelling like a hiker. I got my bag with me and I took a shower and did some laundry before, but it wasn't enough to wash the hiker trash off of you. And they just threw me in hair and makeup. And I'm sitting there like getting my makeup done, about to go on television, and just thinking how bizarre it was. Did the interview with Mario and Kat, and then they just drove me straight back to trail. And an hour later, I was back on trail, and I was just reflecting on that, like, what just happened?
That had to be surreal. I mean, talking about extremes, right? One extreme to the other, from hiker trash out on the trail to having your hair and makeup done for a TV interview.
Yeah. And then the next day on the trail, I'm using like a horse trough to wash the makeup off my face.
Yeah. And Six Flags, I mean, that is literally, from my house, I could run to Six Flags. So that's my neck of the woods. That's where I am.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that was an incredible experience. Just riding those. And for some reason, the day we were there was nobody there. We never waited in line. And there ended up being about 30, 40 hikers there that day. So at one point,
Really?
because you can spot hiker trash from a mile away. So even if we're not there together, we're like, oh, hey. And we took one big picture that just had a bunch of us in it. So it was a lot of fun.
That is awesome. Now, I know the goal was to finish 2,650 miles on the trail. What ended up happening?
Yeah. So at about mile 500, it's actually where I finally met a group of dudes that I really vibed with. And we called ourselves the Misfits, just because there's one guy, and I have to give a shout out to Little Spoon. He's just got one of those radiant personalities to where everyone just flocks around him. And, it became the joke that, Little Spoon is the vortex that you get sucked into. And I absolutely did. So right around Acton's when I met him, and then within 5 minutes, they were sitting at a table and I was about ready to go to bed. And I was like, I need to go start being social. I need to introduce myself to these guys. So I walked up and they had, pack adult beverages on the table. And I was like, hey, you mind if I have one? It's like, absolutely. We're talking 5 minutes later. And he goes, oh, you're with us now within 5 minutes. And then I hiked with him for a long time. But I was pushing some more bigger miles. And once I got up above 20, I started having ankle trouble. So a few years ago, I broke my ankle and I have a metal plate in there. And it never really given me problems, but it had started really hurting. And I just thought it was, this is part of it. Everyone's got the hiker hobble. You'll be fine. But once I started getting closer to Tehachapi, it started giving out. So I'd be walking up on a mountain and it would just collapse and I'd stumble. And that's when I started getting worried that I'm doing permanent damage. And, I told myself it's irresponsible to go into the Sierras with an injury that's making you stumble. So yeah, in Tehachapi, with that group of the Misfits, and I just made a decision I need to get this checked out and I need to do the smart thing here. And so I did. I flew home, saw a specialist, got all the x-rays, and it wasn't broken, but the tendon, they described it like my tendon on that plate is like taking a rubber band and rubbing it on the edge of a desk. And they said if you do that enough, I had severe tendonitis, and then it was causing bone spurs because that tendon was ripping bones off my ankle. So saw the specialist, and I said, am I doing more damage, or am I okay to keep going? And he told me, eventually, if it keeps bothering you, you're going to have surgery, but you're not going to do irreparable damage by keeping going. So I thought, that's great news. I took 2 weeks off to rest it. I'll be fine. And by then, the dudes I was hiking with were about to enter the Sierras. And so I decided, which ended up being a terrible decision, I'm going to do a flip-flop. I'm going to start in Tahoe, and I'll just go slow for a while and let them catch up to me, meet up with them. And for me, getting back on trail just didn't feel the same. I was seeing hikers around me, and they're just talking about the Sierras, and I'm like, I just didn't feel it because I skipped them, and hitting mile 1100 didn't feel like hitting mile 1100 because I just skipped 400 of them. And it started weighing on me. And then I made it about 40, 50 more miles, and my ankle gave out again going up the first big mountain, big test. And I just mentally wasn't in it. And I physically knew I wasn't going to finish the trail if my ankle was still hurting after resting it for 2 weeks. And I made the tough decision of calling it quits and turning back. And it was the hardest decision I've ever made, because for reasons, personal reasons of, I told myself I was going to do something. I want to finish it. And then also, I just told, my million followers I was going to do it. And then I just told national TV that I was going to do it. And so at the end of the day, I just said, I got to do what's right for me, and I got to do what's right for my health. And when I turned around those last 40 miles, I kept seeing familiar faces and people that I had met earlier. And, after 2 conversations and hugs and, emotional talks, I started hiding from people that were coming. I didn't have it in me to talk to them and tell them I was quitting anymore. So I'd see hikers coming and I'd just go behind a tree and take a break. It was just really hard. And then when I got off trail, it was great to get back to family and stuff. And then it took me about a week to decide I have unfinished business, and I'm going back.
I was going to ask if you're going to go back. That's awesome. That's outstanding. And you know what? I want to commend you, because that took a lot of courage. That was courageous what you did, because once you publish something, once you say something, that you're going to do this and it's out there in the world, whether it's you told your family or whether you've told a million followers or national TV that you're doing this. I mean, that puts even more pressure on your shoulders. You're not just doing it for yourself now. You feel like you have this obligation because you've told other people. And now when you're faced with a situation where you have to make the decision you did, I mean, you had to make that decision. It's an added level of pressure that is unneeded, but you did the right thing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And there was times where that definitely helped. I remind myself every day I was out there that I'm out here for me. But I remember specifically one time, the worst section for me was the flattest one, the aqueduct. I absolutely hated it. We walked it at night and there's a huge group and it was like on the solar eclipse or whatever. So it was fun in that aspect. But walking on flat ground after climbing so much just killed my feet. And the next day we were in the wind farm and there's a wind advisory in the wind farm and it's almost 100 degrees. So I remember just finding this little sagebrush and I just curled up in a little ball under it, like just trying to take a break. The wind's blowing. You take 2 steps forward, you're taking 1 step back because of the wind. And I just remember thinking, like, if there's a bus that would come pick me up right now, I would go home. And then, you think about, no, you can't. You made this commitment. You told these people and they kept me going. But yeah, it's some interesting times.
Yeah. Now, a couple questions on the hardware in your ankle. Was it a steel plate on your fibula?
I don't know the technical terms. It goes from like a middle or the lower middle of my shin almost all the way down to my heel on the outside of my right foot.
Yeah. So it's probably your fibula. Your fibula is the small bone on the outside of your lower leg.
Yeah, when I broke it, I actually broke it on both sides and dislocated it. So I had a plate on one side, pins in the other, and it was a whole mess.
You did a number on that. And are you at a point now where you can have that hardware removed?
Yes, and I decided to put it off until after I complete the PCT this year.
You don't think you're going to run into the same issue?
I've been rehabbing it since I've been back and seeing a specialist, and I haven't had issues with it since. And there's my specialist has me going to a couple more appointments before I go to get some special treatments done to it that are supposed to help in the long run. But also, I think I stopped before I had to. It's something I struggle with now. I can deal with the pain. That's fine. I think when I did the flip flop, I think I could have kept going, but I was mentally just not in it. And that's something that's weighed so heavy on me since I stopped. So yeah, this next time I'm not stopping unless they're flying me off the mountain.
So let's talk about that a little bit in terms of the mental versus the physical. I think when anybody hears that, hey, someone's going to hike 2,600 miles, I mean, that is quite a physical challenge. And, good luck to you. I don't know if you have it in you to do that physical challenge. Well, I asked the question, is it the physical is the physical just as big a challenge as the mental challenge of doing something like that? What weighs heavier, do you think, in a feat like conquering the PCT? Is it I know it's a combo, but does one outweigh the other?
I think it depends on what your physical level is going into it. If you're physically fit and you can do that kind of stuff, then the mental is going to be way harder. If you're not physically ready, then the physical is going to wear you down early on. And I saw that with quite a bit of people that, 50, 60 miles in, they're like, I wasn't ready for this. For me, it was mental until my ankle started hurting. And then that added to the mental of it. Like, you're in pain. What are you doing? But the mental, I call it the roller coaster because it's so low at sometimes, but then you climb San Jacinto, you climb Baden Powell, you climb these mountains and you're at the top and you're like, at the end of every day, I felt so accomplished and so proud of what I was doing. So it's just this roller coaster. I tell my friends and family now when they ask about it, I loved every aspect of the PCT except for the walking. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Now you have you gotten your permit for this year?
Yep, all set. I wasn't 8th pick this time. I was a little later, but I got within a few days of what I wanted. So
okay, and what's your departure date?
It's March 26th. So I knew I wanted to do end of March again. The recent snow in California has me sweating a little bit, but I'm taking a little different strategy this time, and I think it'll work out. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Well, what is your different strategy?
Last time I kind of had a little too much fun, I'll say. Spent a lot of 0 days in the beginning, um, and it was a great time. But this time, and I was only doing 10 or 15 miles a day for like the first, I don't know, 3 weeks, month. So, and I could have done more. I was just, enjoying myself and having a great time. This time I'm going to go out there with a more intention of testing myself and seeing what I can really do physically. And then also, not taking as many town days.
Okay.
I saw, like when you were talking with Ballsack, I met her on the trip right before she did her like 40, 50 mile night hike to Cajon Pass. There's like this little bar restaurant after the hot springs. I can't remember where it was, but I had my tent set up and I was inside having a beer and just ordered a pizza, and she comes in and gets a soda and, talks for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to keep going. After they had just done 20 miles, and I'm like, okay, like, have fun. But yeah, it was good.
Nice. Now, Yeti, I'm gonna throw this out to you. When you get to Acton on your hike, send me a message and let me take you out to this great Mexican restaurant in Agua Dulce.
Love it. Absolutely. And you know what? I think I know what it is. I had a mango margarita there. It was incredible. Is it in that like L shape? They kind of let some people camp in the dumpster.
Yes.
Or by the dumpsters.
Yep.
Yeah, loved it. It's a great place. I'll meet you there.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So you have the PCT. Once you conquer the PCT, any other big trails out there that appeal to you? Any inkling to do the AT or the CDT?
To be honest, no. The AT, everyone I hear talk about the AT, they say this green tunnel, you're just up and down, and I'm like, that sounds miserable to me. And they talk about the fun times too, but for me, I want to do more international. I want to do the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu is just a short one. I want to do more traveling outside of the U.S. and more hiking and those kinds of situations. And I think my girlfriend, I left for the PCT last year after we'd been dating 6 months. So now it's a year and 6 months, and I don't know how many years she's going to put up with me for leaving half the year. So, but yeah, we'll keep having fun. We just got done traveling because that's my gift to her is let me do this and then I'll take you to Mexico when I get done. So
nice. Does she have any hiking bug in her?
She told me like the second week we were dating to never ask her to go hiking with me. Yeah, she said I'll stay at camp and read a book.
Okay, maybe if you want to do some international travel, maybe you could talk her into doing the Camino. I mean, because that's you're not really carrying a bag or sleeping equipment. You're ending up at hostels and pubs every day. So,
yep, I've planted the bug about the Camino already. I don't know. At first she told me absolutely not, but we'll see.
Okay, all right. Hey, Jared, you know where we are?
Pro tip.
Oh, look at you.
The pro tip insight of the week.
That's right. You're like an expert here. Yes, it is that time of the episode where you get to share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better. What do you have for us?
My pro tip is don't stress the plan. Take your first step. I spent so much time, and a lot of people do, writing down, I'm going to do this miles this day, and then I'll be here, and then I'll do this and this. And by day 2, I threw everything out the window and just said, I'm going to just do whatever I feel is right. And so my tip would be don't stress the plan. And then the cliche, hike your own hike. Don't feel like you have to put in miles just because you want to meet somebody at this place or do this. I tried that a couple times in those days that I was hiking, 25 miles to get to Hikertown. I did not have fun those last 10 miles. I was pushing it, but I wanted to meet my buddies, which was a good time too. But a lot of the reason I loved about hiking solo is just doing whatever I felt like doing at any moment.
Yeah, there are some shorter hikes out there that are, maybe 30, 40 miles that you can plan for. You can put together a pretty tight itinerary. But when you're talking about a 2,600 mile trail, everything goes out the window after the first couple of days. So you're not going to meet your deadlines. You're going to have to be flexible. So that's an outstanding pro tip.
Yeah, I spent hours on Far Out looking how far things were and writing notes, and up to 500 miles. I had everything planned, and then I never used it.
Okay. So there you have it. That's it. This episode is just about in the books. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Yeti. Want to thank him for joining us this week. Jared, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures?
Yeah, my username is Jay Crushes It, so JAY Crushes It, and Instagram, TikTok are my big ones, and then on YouTube I do my vlog for hiking.
Okay, now tell us a little bit about Jay Crushes It, because I asked you at the very beginning before we went on air, do you go by Jay or is it Jared? Because your Instagram is Jay Crushes It.
Yeah, and that's how this social media all started. I created a fake name just to track my weight loss for me personally, private Instagram account. And it was like that way until about a year ago. And I saw people posting from this app called TikTok. And I wanted to make a video on there, download it, and put it on my private Instagram, just showing my progress, not knowing how it worked. And I'm like, I have 0 followers. Nobody's going to see this. Post the video, download it. 2 hours later, I picked up my phone and I had like 500,000 views on this video. Instantly panicked, hit delete. And then I was just like, wait a second, you know, I've been working with my therapist about being vulnerable and doing all this stuff. And so I just said, let's see what happens, and ran with it. And yeah, that's 6 months after that, I made my Instagram public and I had a few videos that just went mega viral. And I watched my Instagram go from 300 followers to 50,000 followers in like 3 hours.
Holy smokes. That is
Yeah.
impressive. That is impressive. That's wild.
Yeah, I was going insane. I was just terrified, but I decided to run with it, and now here we are.
Hey, way to be vulnerable, Jared. Nice job. All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Hey, remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We're on TikTok, Jared. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at johnfreakinmuir@gmail.com.
The Adventure Media Recommendation.
All right, Jared, I'm also looking to you to share a recommendation for a book, a movie, documentary, some kind of adventure media. It's going to help our listeners stay connected to the trail. Call this our adventure media recommendation. You have anything you want to recommend to people out there?
I do, and this one's going to sound a little broy and a little off topic, I guess, but mine would be Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. He's an ultra marathon guy, and it's the mental aspect of what he talks about in the book was tremendous for me. Just, it's a lot about, when you think you're done, you're not done yet, kind of stuff like that. And whenever I was in a hard part of the trail, that Hauser Canyon, I put on a chapter called Taking Souls, where he just talks about, passing people and like just certain aspects of getting over the mental toughness and making yourself mentally tough. Was a huge book for me.
Taking Souls. Love it.
Yep.
What have we not asked you?
And before we wrap things up tonight, just one more segment called What Have I Not Asked You that you're dying to tell us about? What did we miss tonight during the interview?
Man, I think we covered all of the fun stuff I wanted to talk about, at least.
Okay. Well, that is a wrap from the John Freaking Muir studio. Any shout outs to friends and family, Jared?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out my girlfriend for putting up with me and also supporting me on the trail and sending me my packages when I need them. So
big shout out to her. All right. Hey, thank you for tuning in. Always remember the trail is the trail. Doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you just had your hair and makeup done for your TV interview. The trail is the trail. Embrace the sock.